Welcome to AI in Design, where we explore how artificial intelligence is reshaping the world of design. I'm Nick Martellero.
And I'm Dan Saffer, and we're faculty at Carnegie Mellon's Human-Computer Interaction Institute, the HCII. Each week, we break down the latest AI developments, dive deep into topics that matter to designers, and talk with fascinating guests who are right at the intersection of these fields.
Whether you're a designer working with AI or an AI practitioner interested in design, we're glad you're here.
This week, we're discussing Figma Make, evaluating how much time Figma Make actually saves.
We'll be talking about how designers should think about bias in LLMs.
Target bets on the pairing of AI and UX.
And a new way to vibe electronic circuit boards for custom hardware.
But first, we're recording this on Monday, and it's the first day of fall semester. We thought it might be interesting to riff on how the classes we teach have changed and what's new this semester. So, Nick, what are you teaching this semester?
So I'm teaching the third iteration of my AI Augmented Designer course. This is a course where we teach students how to use AI through all phases of the design process, from initial user research through to requirements generation, specification, all the way up to prototyping out fully interactive software. And this year, some of the biggest changes that I'm making is really pushing towards the designers and the students learning much, much more about AI augmented software development. There's been a lot of changes in the models that we're using. We're now up to, say, Opus 5 and GPT-5. These models are so much more capable when you are vibe coding that they are producing full systems on really long running sessions where you might give it a full product requirement document and it can go work for an hour. And then you come back, and that's actually really different from the way I was teaching in the past, where people were very quickly back and forth creating and vibe coding a new prototype and working where they would have seconds or maybe a minute between when the AI would generate something and when they would start chatting again. And so I'm going to be teaching a lot more, almost professional software development practice and how to think like a professional software developer a little more in the class, which I think is a big, interesting change.
That's weird, though. I mean, you'll be having students like, okay, I put the prompt in, and now I got 10 minutes. Can I go get some froyo and some coffee, and I'll come back?
Yeah, and that's really a big part of this class is the students understanding what it means to work with AI in these different ways and how it changes their work process. So many of the things we've talked about on the podcast, for example, this idea of having to wait, where I think that the wait time is actually just getting longer and longer the more that you give to the AI systems and let them work. And so this changes what do you do in between. And so it's possible that maybe that's what they're doing. I actually, as part of the course, I talk a lot about how people can be really reflective about their design process and how to think about, well, what do you do to fill that time in between a long running job? How are you actually doing other tasks? So that's going to be a part of it. And the students should be learning what is their AI augmented process and what is working for them.
What kind of tools do they use? Do you have a set, hey, here's a set of tools, or is it use whatever you want?
It's a mix. So in the course, we have students use at least the things that CMU provides us. Those include things Google Gemini, Microsoft Copilot, GitHub Copilot. So students can get access to these for free. However, this semester I am going to be asking students to pick either Claude Code or Codex and pay at least the lowest level pro plan per month to try those out. That's actually another big change. Is before we were able to get by with all the free stuff, but now we probably do need to be using at least one of the professional level tools. Beyond that, though, I don't actually have students, say, follow along with any specific tool. The point is that students explore many, many tools and that they should be developing their own process and their own set of tools that work for them. So, for example, a lot of students gravitate towards Figma Make. A lot of students gravitate away from Figma Make and actually start working completely in a tool like Claude Code or Google Gemini. Oftentimes, students find how to weave together like 7 tools. And actually, that reminds me of, say, the the Figma report where many designers are doing the same thing. And that's really what I think professional practice looks like, at least today. It isn't a single tool to rule them all. It's you use some tools for this, some tools for that, and then it's a matter of figuring out which ones work well.
And so much now is customizable. I mean, even if you're using Figma, you might have rolled your own Figma plugins for a number of different things, or you have your own Claude skills for a number of different things. So everything is so personalized, so customizable that it's almost hard to say, well, everybody's using Figma now. Okay, well, what does that exactly mean anymore? Okay, that's the platform where we all kinda gather and look at stuff maybe, but yeah, but it's not like everyone is using the same tool the exact same way.
Exactly. And actually, the third assignment in my class is the students developing their own AI design tool. So they use the first two projects where they were using AI to design products and services. And then they say, well, what could be better in my process? And what do I want to do that I know AI probably could do to help me, but it's not actually, no one has actually figured out that. And they build their own things. And again, we've heard about that out in the real world where designers are starting to build their own tools again, Figma plugins, Claude Code skills and connectors, MCP servers. And so the students are doing that. And oftentimes what ends up happening is they develop a tool for themselves that really works well with their process. And then they take that forward into the fourth project in my class, which is a new product development. And that's the thing that I often think really accelerates them. Interestingly enough, though, it's one of the most challenging projects because I think students are not always presented with this opportunity to craft the thing that helps you make other things. Oftentimes we handed you a pen, we handed you
Photoshop,
software, right?
whatever, yeah.
Exactly. Whereas now I'm giving you an opportunity to say you can build what you want on top of this AI material. And it takes students it takes them a good week to figure out what the heck I'm even talking about and what they do. But usually the projects there are super cool. And I'm always really excited about what they show. And the students are often really excited about what they show each other because it opens up their mind to like how you could use AI in different ways for the design process. Dan,
Cool.
what are you teaching? What have you changed?
So this year I'm teaching 3 separate classes. I'm teaching 2 sections of designing for AI products and services, which I think I counted yesterday. This is my 8th time teaching that class. Over the last 3.5 years I've been teaching it, it's changed quite a bit. And some of it is before it was very hard even to prototype some of the ideas that we were coming up with. And now we are forcing students to prototype everything that they come up with using the tools themselves to be able to do it. So that class is all about designing for AI, not necessarily with AI, which is what your class is all about. This is about how do you find the best kinds of projects to move forward with. So it's almost like a design strategy class, although we definitely go into the actual building, designing, and thinking through designs themselves. So that class from when it started, where Gen AI was the final project, and that was really hard. Now agents are the final project, and that is a big change. We added agents last year, and you could barely do anything. You just couldn't prototype them. It was very hard for students to even imagine what to do with these things. And I'm expecting that in the past year has completely changed. The second class is the Advanced Interaction Design Studio class, and that one is for students wanting to become designers. And a lot of what we do in that class, at least the initial part of that class, is all around design systems. And so this year, it's all about how AI incorporates into design systems. How do you make your design system readable? What kinds of things do you need in a new design system when you're making things like new components? Or how do you start to work with design systems as part of your process when you're working with AI? So a lot of new integrations there. We've changed the big final project now. It's always been about how do you use new technology. We used to make that a lot more about how do you make a space more accessible, a physical space out in the world. using new technology. We're moving some of that accessibility to another project that happens earlier. And this one we're leaving a lot more wide open because we want students to start looking for problems and being a lot more entrepreneurial. So we're trying to make the second half of the class really about, okay, you've got all these design skills. Now go find a problem that's worth solving and use some of them. And still with a focus on new technologies. And the last class that I'm teaching is an independent study. Last year I did UI for AI. This year I'm doing one called AI widgets. I'm doing it with the head of our department, Brad Myers, and we are looking at what happens when you add AI to the smallest microinteractions, TM. What happens when you have AI in, for example, a scroll bar or cut and paste? Can you make these things that have basically been unchanged for decades? What happens if you make them smarter? Saying, select everything in this photo that's red, or hey, scroll me back to the place where I was talking about where I was talking about this topic. How do we start to make the little pieces of our applications a lot smarter rather than being like, okay, we're going to replace all this with AI? So those are the big three that I'm doing this semester. All of them, the AI widgets one brand new, the other two pretty overhauled just because, yeah, everything's changed. And I was likening it to laying down tracks in front of a fast moving train today. And that's what it feels like. Is like, how do we catch up with like, for example, the agents project is the last project of the class. And I'm like, well, geez, in 3 or 4 months, what's going to happen on the agents front? Is that going to be radically different in a couple months? Are there going to be brand new readings? And trying to stay on top of all this stuff is, as I'm sure it is for most of our listeners, a real challenge. And more so for figuring out like what is the separating the wheat from the chaff for students so you can be like, this is the core of what you need to know.
Yeah, I think a lot of the thought that I put into a class is trying to have these learning objectives, which are about process and how to think about design that last beyond any tool changes or any updates to AI models. Dan, I have two questions for you actually to come back at the question on the tools. So for advanced, do you have tools? Are you letting people use whatever they want?
So for advanced, it's funny because we had a long debate this year or at the end of last semester. We're like, yeah, how much are we going to be using Figma in this class? And we have determined that we think that it is important to, as we've talked about many times on this show, to have both the code view indirect manipulation via AI and the direct manipulation on Canvas. So we're allowing students to do things both in Figma, Figma Make, and Claude Design, and any combination thereof that they would like to do. Now, if they want to use something else, that's fine. But a lot of the tools we're providing are for those two setups. And like you, we are asking students, hey, the cheap free stuff just isn't going to work anymore. Although we get Figma and Figma Make, I think we get good free educational stuff for that. We don't have good free educational stuff for Claude. Claude, if you're listening, please, Anthropic, give us give us some of that sweet educational tokens. But you need much more processing power than you would get on the free thing. So yeah, we are asking students to step up with those. And in designing for AI, that one is, yeah, that is wide open. Use whatever you want to prototype these things, whether that's Figma, whether that's Cursor, whether that's Claude, you name it. If you can prototype in it, that's that's your business.
And then my other question was, especially for design of AI products and services, how are you thinking about the question of value? I know that that class is a lot around what value does AI give to a product or service. And that's really a lot of the strategic thinking that you want students to develop. But how have your thoughts changed about that, given the fact that we have been teaching that course now for many years? And it seems like, I don't know, I feel like we're still asking the same question of where is the value with all the AI that we're trying to develop?
I think that's one of those fundamentals that doesn't change, right? There are a certain set of things that we know are valuable to users and organizations, that doesn't change, whether that's an exchange of money, whether that is reputational value, whether that is IP, whether that is retention, adoption, all those kinds of things. That doesn't change. How you measure that is what has become trickier, particularly when we talk about token spend. And how much is it going to cost to run this thing? That's really in flux right now. That's really hard to determine. I saw this great meme the other day where it was like, wait, I spend $100 for Claude, but my token spend is actually $700. How does that work, and how does that scale if you're trying to do this as a big company trying to implement features? It's so tricky to be able to teach that part of it, really the product manager side of it, where it's like, hey, let's look at a spreadsheet and see how much this is actually going to cost to run and maintain over time. That's really hard right now. So that's a little bit up in the air when you're trying for, like, as we do in the class, we try for like a 10x return on anything. How can you tell what that's going to be right now? It's really hard.
I think that actually the discussion that we're having about these classes takes us really well into the stories that we have for this week because they touch upon a number of things that are related to how we work and how we provide value with AI. The first story that we have is actually a report from Figma where they actually asked the question, "Hey, does Figma Make save anyone any time when they're doing design work?" And they put together a randomized control trial where they had 100 people split between tasks using Figma Make or just using regular Figma without the Figma Make capabilities to redesign a social media post from light mode to dark mode and then add a few features. And in the report, there's actually a lot of really cool nerdy stuff around, hey, how do we run such an experiment and how do we even measure this without having a bunch of confounds, which I appreciate as a researcher. But what they ended up finding was that it saves 20-ish% time
A,
and that
li- a little bit more if you're a product manager, which I thought was interesting.
I found that to not be so surprising because some of
No, not surprising at all.
the thing that I really that got me thinking though was when I looked at the visualizations in the report and I actually looked at the amount of time saved. So 20%, when you hear that number, is like, wow, man, 20% effects on time reduction sound amazing. But then you actually look at the numbers and you're like, well, I went from, say, a 52-minute task to a 45-minute task. And I sat and thought about this. I was like, I don't know if that actually feels different. Like it is measurably different, but I don't know how much that feels different to me when I think about, say, my day in 1 hour time blocks. I'm still 45 minutes, 52 minutes. Well, it's the same hour. And what I wanted to see, or I'd love to hear from people, is cool, if you are saving 20% of time, are you doing something else with that? Or does it actually feel different to you?
Once you start putting it in those terms, and I don't think that a 20% savings in, say, knowledge work is a massive savings. I do think there are many other places, and something like customer service, like saving 20% or saving 15 minutes an hour, that's a huge savings. But that's not what they're measuring. We're not looking at AI in general. This is just for Figma.
Yeah, my thought here is that what it might allow you to do is do more iteration. Now, that's not part of this experiment. They were trying to see, do the task, go through it, and then you're done because they want to see, well, how much time did we save? However, most likely what people are probably doing is they say, I'm going to work on this for X amount of time, and I fill up the time with task. If I'm moving faster by using a tool like Figma Make, I may be able to iterate more, which ideally should get me to a better design. One of the things I'll point out here was that, especially for product managers, right, they also reported a pretty significant feeling of the task being easier. So 30% easier, and that they could contribute in more ways than they could before, which I think that's a huge, like from a qualitative perspective, is probably this huge gain for a product manager. I wonder what the qualitative thresholds of, hey, this really feels like a big difference. Not just, oh, what's a measurable difference, but what actually is something that I can say and go, wow, this has completely changed how I work, or it changed how easy something is. And I don't know. I don't know if 20% time savings is there if we're just talking about that. I don't know if how many iteration cycles it would be. I'm wondering, and I want to ask the question of, what are the thresholds where we really see a qualitative change and, oh, this is really improved how I work.
I want to see more like, is this a better outcome? Efficiency, again, in knowledge work, particularly creative knowledge work, may not be the benchmark, right? It is all about, wow, with this thing, I was either able to produce a lot more, which is kind of what you're saying. Okay, can you do a lot more iterations or produce 50 different variations of this? Or wow, this thing I was able to produce something that I couldn't have done alone and it's better. I think that quality metric I think is what is really important. And I don't know if we're seeing a lot of those kinds of studies.
Yeah, I'll say we're trying to do this in the lab here as we develop new AI tools and try to understand how designers and engineers are working with AI. And it's super hard. It's actually really hard to measure, like, is there a quality difference? We're developing ways. We have some, say, objective things that we can do. You can do, say, a usability test on something and show that it requires fewer clicks or that the users can complete a task faster. Our standard usability metrics, and those are better. But of course, when it comes to, say, the aesthetic feel of something, right, it's maybe we go and we get experts to give us a critique of that. But yeah, it's a challenging thing. But I agree with you. I mean, ultimately, and this is something that I constantly push, say, my students to do, and I push myself, is how do I know we're getting better work, not just faster? In general, my team works at a pretty good speed, right? We get things done in a reasonable amount of time. Are we any better because of this? That's really the thing that I
Right.
don't totally know how to measure.
And the dream of AI has always been, or at least for some of us, has been, do you get that centaur effect, right? Where you get the, hey, this is something that a human alone couldn't do and the AI alone couldn't do. That the combination of the two things was getting you this higher quality, more interesting, more whatever, more effective, whatever it is, just a better version of that that neither human nor machine alone could do. And I'd love to see some stuff on that.
Yeah, so kudos to the Figma team in doing this experiment and sharing the data with us. And I would say, if you're listening, hey, let's see if there's ways to see that, how the actual output gets better measurably.
Yeah, keep it coming. Our next article is from Maud Benaddi, who is a senior product designer at Phantom Buster. I hate when I have to. This article is called Bias in LLMs, or How to Design for Everyone with Tools Built for Someone. And I think this is an important article because it is so easy, particularly because I am a middle aged white dude, that I forget that so much of this has been trained on middle aged, or as they go into the article, actually young white dudes from the West, and that having something like Reddit as an expert source is not an unbiased source. And so things that the LLMs are producing are definitely skewed in a way that we often don't stop and think about because we are generally tend to just accept what the LLM is producing. And How that affects designers is that it starts to affect things like generated personas, for example. So, generated personas are going to be biased. If the tool generates a bunch of personas and they're all the same demographic or they're all affluent, that is the model's, as she puts it, the model's center of gravity pulling everything towards what the data that it's been trained on. So other places that this affects us is AI assisted copy. All those are also influenced by the output and by gendered pronouns and family structures and geographic references. What are the defaults there? Summarizing qualitative research is another area where the models, just because of their very nature, they tend to flatten differences. So, what it may be focusing on may be leaving out a lot of very important edge cases. And having the AI come up with these conclusions, just remember that there is a demographic skew towards this. It is not an objective analysis. So, I thought this was a really good refresher on the things that we tend to take for granted all the time, or at least I do. It's not even thinking about how these outputs, yes, they really are biased, and you have to be aware of that as you're doing design work.
This article reminded me actually of a LinkedIn post by Dr. Liz Gerber, who is the founding co-director of Northwestern's Center for Human Computer Interaction and Design and is also a full professor there. And Liz had this amazing post on having students try to create personas of themselves, of college students, and basically watching the entire class go, oh my gosh, like that's not me. Like, this isn't me. This isn't any of my hopes and dreams and how I look at the world. And one could argue, oh, well, maybe they did a naive prompting of that. But actually, the exercise, I think, helps to really show people when they try to do it for themselves and then they don't see that reflected. Because it's so easy for us to say, oh, well, I'm going to create a persona, say, for another user. I'm trying to learn. And oh, that looks pretty good because it sounds confident, it's nice and complete, but really it isn't there. So I'll share a link to this in the show notes, and I'm actually going to do this in my class this semester when we talk about AI generated personas as one of the modules. But yeah, I think that this article is a really nice reminder to everyone who's excited about and using this is to say, hey, just remember where does the data come from? And actually probably think about how to do auditing and checks for yourself to make sure that it's representative. Again, I think that AI generated personas and information can be super powerful because as we often teach here, there there's a wide but shallow knowledge of so many things baked into these AI. But really, when you want to go deep, you've got to check and see, is it actually capturing the depth that I need, or do I need to be getting information from other sources?
Right. Well, what's interesting about your and Liz's study is that you're still testing with people who are generally affluent and generally not super far away from the mean of what these AI have been trained on. So it would be interesting to imagine going to someplace that is completely different and having it generate a persona for a person there would be really interesting, and have it be like, how off is this? And you imagine probably pretty off. One other thing I really like about this article is that it does point to a number of the actual studies to go look at. And so those are also really valuable. Our next target is Target, and we're talking about Target Corporation. Now, Target has seen some rough times over the last year. We won't get into that, but Target is restructuring its top technology ranks, and it now has a new and its first chief AI officer and a new senior vice president of user experience. That's Chandhu Nair as the company's first chief AI officer and Purvi Shah as the SVP of UX. They were promoting this as a real handshake between these two new execs, that they thought that it was really exciting to have the AI and UX really working hand in hand to solve real meaningful problems. We talked about how do you find value, and I hope that that is where these two execs are going to really be focusing. In the announcement, they're saying that Target doesn't intend to build a freestanding AI strategy, but it wants to have everything to be focused on what the company already has in its stores, merchandising, and workforce. And I really like that Chandhu Nair says that the measure of success is not going to be about how much AI they're deploying. It's about the difference it's going to make for growth, the guest experience, and the team's ability to do their best work. So, really augmenting what they already have. And I think that that is a super cool thing. And that's what we teach all the time in designing for AI, that kind of collaboration to create value.
Target is probably taking a very disciplined, value driven approach to AI, which I can imagine given the state that we're in, where now people are starting to ask a lot of questions on what value does this actually generate for the company and not we're going to use AI and now the stock price goes up. Although now I'm curious to see what Target's stock price has done. It's up a little bit today. Actually, within the last week, it's up. And actually, in the last 5 days,
There you go. This announcement came out about 2 weeks ago.
there could be other reasons for that as well. I mean, we've seen all kinds of crazy stories. Allbirds saying they're now an AI company and their stock going crazy. But I really like again, what I say is kind of a disciplined approach here of a value driven. How are we going to use AI to actually make our operations better, to actually make customer experience better, and ultimately the subtext of it all, how are we going to make more money because of this? Because at the end of the day, I think that's ultimately what the goal is going to be.
Right. Target's not there as a charity. They want to make money, but they also want to Target traditionally, and if we leave the last couple years aside, has always been a very user focused company. They were kind of the first in America to really think about product quality, and they were going to be the step up from things like Walmart, for example. They were always about product and user experience. And I hope that this signals a return back to that ethos with a little help from AI. I'd love to see more companies having this kind of pairing. Can we have more of this tight collaboration between AI, the data science, and design, and really start to think about where's the value there?
And now for our last story, a quick and fun one.
I knew that you were gonna like this story, Nick.
There over the last week, there was a new app called EasyCircuit that came out, which was a hardware prototyping tool that lets you vibe code hardware prototypes. Think about interactive electronic devices, your Arduino, Raspberry Pi type devices where I'm making blinky lights and buttons and microphone inputs. And this is something that I think actually has been talked about on the show a little bit. We've actually talked to companies that are doing AI assisted circuit design. This is definitely a very consumer oriented and hobbyist oriented tool. I tried it out at least with a quick little project where I asked it to make some cool DJ lights that will react to the frequency of the music, and it will automatically pick a number of components for you, the circuit, microcontroller, the passive components, the LEDs, the screen. In my case, it'll lay it out. It'll actually give you a connection, a wiring guide, and then we'll show you even how to lay it out on a breadboard. I haven't looked at it a bunch, but I love the idea here. I think that it's fun. We have vibe coding for software apps, and it's only the next step to start doing it for hardware, especially when you have really component based products. Arduino and all of the sensor modules that come from, say, companies SparkFun or Adafruit, where wiring these things up is actually pretty simple to do in the hardware. It might only be 2 to 4 wires to actually connect things. It's cool. It's a pretty fully featured thing to try. I will say that as I tried it, there's a couple features I'm like, oh, this is really and I'm not sure there was a lot of QA on this. So, for example, there's a render the breadboard where you get an image of it that isn't, say, the circuit board layout, but is shows you what the parts look like, and that wasn't so great. It definitely wired up things in really wrong places. And so if you were to actually put wires where they showed you in this image, your stuff would blow up and
Blow
let out the blue smoke, as we say. And there were some other things. Saving, if you don't save and you go to this thing, which is actually pretty cool, and probably maybe how they're thinking about monetization, which is you can buy the parts and maybe they have their own shop or they get affiliate fees. But if you click that button before you save your new circuit, it just clears the whole circuit. And I was like, oh boy, that's a real simple thing. So just a reminder to everyone out there, hey, vibe code all kinds of prototypes, but do think or at least have some type of checks on basic usability stuff. Still important to do.
But I think about things like this combined with friend of the pod, Mike Kuniowski, his hardware startup where it's create your own hardware. If you can do that and then create your own circuits boards for it, you can start to create your own small electronics that you just want to make. And I remember back when I had my design studio 15 odd years ago, and we were doing a lot of IoT kind of things. It was really, really hard to do all that. And now it seems like we're, if not there, we're getting close to being able to do that. Hey, here's the circuit board. Here's the CAD file for the design with all the materials picked out. Push button, go send that to be built. I think we're getting close to that era of custom small electronics. And I think that's a really cool space to be in. Again, not everybody's going to do that. Everyone's going to want to go to Target and buy this stuff that's already done for them. But I think for a small group of people, that's wow, I really want this very particular thing, and it's far too small for Target to make. I'll make it for myself. And I think that is a super interesting space.
And I think for designers, it becomes really interesting because it opens up a completely new area of interaction design and product design that you might be able to conceptualize ideas, but you don't have the skills to create these hardware prototypes. And we've been working for decades. Actually, Mike Kuniowski for decades has had a conference that he ran called Sketching in Hardware, which is intended to bring people together to think about how do we make this easier. And it is a lot easier. I mean, when I learned this stuff, it was really hard. I mean, I have an engineering degree in mechatronics to basically learn how to build interactive hardware prototypes. And today, it's so much easier because of the software tools and the way that we've been designing some of the hardware to get first and second year students to start creating new ideas with hardware. And so we've moved the needle so much on being able to do this. And I do think that these types of tools of vibe coding hardware is the next step. And I think it will open up opportunities. And what I'd like to see then is more designers recognizing that hardware can be a very interesting component of new interaction design for products and services that you are trying to make.
We teach a class here in gadgets, which is all about this, and then we have Chris Harrison's Future Interfaces group, which is basically all about this kind of thing. How do we find new ways of interacting with the world with new kinds of hardware? And this would just allow that kind of prototyping so fast, so easy. Yeah, it's exciting. This is an exciting thing, even if it doesn't work 100% right now.
Right. It still might be early days, but I'm excited to see that people are putting more of these platforms out there. And I'm excited to see where people go with this and what people might be able to make.
And that's our show for this week. We'll be back next week. More AI, more design, and we'll see you then.